So yes, hello guys. I'm here today with Clem. We've been working together for the last couple of weeks, and Clem is the UX lead of the project I'm working on today. And she's going to talk about this digital transformation project that she has been part of a couple of years ago. How long ago was it?
We started like 3 years ago.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that, and we want to show you guys how digital design is not only about creating visual things, it's more around transforming how companies work, how services work, and how you can bring real impact to society and whatever you guys are working with. So, Clem, please introduce yourself. Yes. Who are you?
So I'm Clem. Clem is short for Clémence. I'm French. I've been in London for 4 years now. I moved here for work. And I've been a designer for more than 10, 11 years now. And in terms of background, started my career working on electronic products for sport, working on small devices, and started expanding because it was back then. So started expanding from a product to what that means for connected objects, what that means for apps and services and so on, and moved to designing big digital services. And the project we're going to talk about was when I was part of a consultancy. Right. And we were all design consultants, which means that we were designing products, but also really thinking about redesigning entire services, entire journeys, and thinking about how we can solve big problems and what is the impact on the organization. And the product is almost the tool that's going to help you to do this big transformation.
Yeah, it's interesting because lots of people coming from graphic design, they see design as purely as visual work. It's something like we try to re-educate them to show it's more around how you solve real problems, especially the real world. So you particularly worked for the Met.
Yes.
So tell people who the Met is, because people in the UK know it, but...
Yeah, so the Met is how it's called here, so it stands for the Metropolitan Police. And is the police force in the UK that is in charge of the London area. So I have no idea how it works in Brazil. I know it's very different in France. In France we have a national police and then local police. Here, police forces are organised by regions. And London, because it's a really big city, there's one police force for London. There's just one tiny detail, is that City of London, so the square mile of this city, is another police force.
It's very
which adds a bit of complexity when you start designing services for this, but you have another one in the middle. And they do a lot of services, and I guess depending on the countries, what the police is responsible for is also a bit different. So obviously their main role is to protect the public and ensure the security, but also making sure that what's happening in the city works well. So they also have other services that are a bit outside of crime and crime protection or crime solving, but it's also around having the right permits, having the right licenses and all of that. So when it comes to designing services for the police, there's all of those other services that the public might not be aware of.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of time and a lot of resources outside of just looking at crime.
That's nice. And when it came to you with the project, how was this brief? Because it's very different from a proper regular design brief. So how did the service come to you? How did you
Sure. So first of all, we didn't start with this project, and I think it's interesting to understand how the relationship started with the Met.
Right.
We started with a much smaller project where we were looking at providing tablets to police officers. So when they go to a crime scene, for example, or an incident, at the moment they report everything on a small notebook, or sometimes they have small forms or small booklets, and they do everything manually with pen and paper, old school. Yeah. And then they go back to the station and then they type it in. So they lose a lot of time going back to the station, being in front of a computer, where they provide the most value is when they are on the street. So the purpose with this project in providing them tablets was to get them back on the streets as fast as possible. So the idea was to replace whatever booklet they had or whatever form they would have to fill out when they're back at the station directly on the tablet. So when they are on the incident, they can start writing notes, or they can just go back to their car and start typing the reports in the car. So And the brief was, we need to provide tablets, which is not necessarily where you should start thinking about it, but that's fine, it's like, okay, we're going to help you to solve this the right way. So we did this first project with them, which was quite an interesting kind of niche project and quite focused. And then the approach we had was always to start asking the right question. So, okay, so yes, you say tablet, but actually what are you trying to do? And what I explained was we want to get them back on the street as fast as possible is actually the challenge we're trying to solve. It's nothing to do with the app we're building on the tablet. Right. So it's always about extracting yourself from the brief and understand what is the problem you're trying to solve and what's the big picture. Right. So we started with this, and then because we had this approach to ask the right question and not just design the product they were asking us to design, we started uncovering a lot of other issues around this and around the fact that all their kind of digital systems were really, really outdated, and we were looking at, okay, what is the impact of this on the public? So next project we did with them, they actually started with a big question this time, and the big question was, but we helped them to phrase the brief properly this time, and the big question was, how can we change the relationship and improve the relationship between the Met and the public?
Got it. So it's still the tablet project. Did you guys deliver this project as a separate project? So
yes, separate project. We delivered something that was supposed to be a pilot. Okay. And we kind of left the project and let them piloting it in one of the boroughs in London, and then we moved to the other big question on how can we improve the relationship between the Met and the public.
Oh, very interesting. And how was that?
So because it was a really broad question, it's like, okay, yes, so if we're talking about improving the relationship, what is the issue today with the relationship? Yeah. Most of the things you do when you start solving those big challenges is very research-led. So we did that big discovery phase where we did a lot of research. We interviewed a lot of members of the public, organised a mix of research methodologies, so a mix of like focus groups and in-depth interviews with people who have been victim of crime, people who have been victim of other incidents, people that are doing other type of processes in police stations to really understand what is the issue. Then we also shadowed a lot of police officers and shadowed people in the call centre. Right. And also interviewed people at various levels in the organisation, so police officers on the street, but also decision makers. And the outcome of this massive research phase was really to identify the key point and the key issues to come up with a plan for the next 5 years.
Right.
And that plan was including what type of services we need to deliver to the public, so what type of new things we need to deliver, but at the same time looking at the internal changes, the dependencies on the systems but on the people as well, and also because we're talking about the police, there's a little bit of a political agenda behind it. So what is the mayor trying to achieve, what is the commissioner trying to achieve, and how does that play out with the plan we're putting in place, and the main thing in this plan was really to try not to be too constrained by those dependencies, and what is the value we can provide to the public as soon as possible. Right. And the main issue we found in this research phase was that communication is broken at one point, and that's why the relationship is not as good as it could be, because people think that the police is doing a great job, but what happens is when something happens to you, if you're been a victim of a crime, for example, your emotional state is quite traumatizing to be a victim of crime. So you need the support from the police, and you need the reassurance. And even if you know that they probably do a lot of things in the background, you need to know what's happening, and you need to know if you can help. You want to be part of this process. And what happened is that you report your crime and you get a lot of support, and then there's this phase where a lot of things happen in the background and you're not aware of it. And then there's an outcome, and then you might not be happy with the outcome, but there's no dialogue here either. Yeah. So there's a lot of things we can think when it comes to digital services to help this, to really improve this. So that's more kind of from the public point of view, but we've also understood a bit better where the issues were inside the Met.
Yeah, correct. And how big was this team working on this? Like, because I imagine
on our side?
Yes, on your side.
During the discovery phase or during the delivery?
Well, whatever you can say, like how maybe something that grew as you guys
Yes.
progressed, right? So how was it structured?
So it was
initially,
actually
maybe?
very small at the beginning. So when we did the discovery phase, we were something like 4 people.
It's quite small.
It's quite small. A mix of researchers, designers, strategists, and usually everyone is a bit flexible in their skill set because everyone needs to understand every other aspect of the project to deliver good value. And then when we started delivering, we started with a team. We were a much bigger team, so I think we were 9, and then we reduced when more things were in place and it was more kind of follow up and hand over to the Met.
Interesting. And moving to the project itself and the execution after you discovered some of the issues, how was, maybe you can pick one, like you say, okay, we got this problem which was quite big, and tell us like how it was before you guys implemented something, how was the process to implement that, and what really changed in terms of how the public received it.
So just maybe to give a few examples of how it was before. Most of the processes were based on paper forms or things on the phone.
Yeah.
And when I say paper forms, usually you have to go to a police station to then get that paper form. And if you fill it out, then it's going to go in the mail and it's going to, be in a small truck to go to another building. So all of those processes are very slow, and also for the public, finding a police station, going to a police station requires you to most of the time take a day off work to be able to go there, because it's rarely open in the evening or open during the weekend. And any kind of emergency processes, so if something really bad happened to you, it happens on the phone. But the way the phone is set up, like an operator on the phone can only deal with one person at a time.
Yeah.
So in terms of optimizing those processes, it's really hard. So that's how it was before.
Just one question there. Do you think it's the same in France as well? Just because people used to think in Brazil like, oh well, it's a first world country, it's a very developed country, this kind of thing. The process would be more streamlined and more easier to go through.
Exactly the same.
And it's exactly the same there as well.
Really
very
bad.
bureaucratic, slow.
Very bureaucratic, slow, and it's not slow because people are not willing to make it
exactly,
faster.
yeah, because
it's slow because most of the time resources are very stretched. So, as any country with public services, the budgets are getting cut every year, but the demand is going up.
Yeah.
So it requires to rethink about it, how we can reorganize the resources to make it more efficient, and what type of tools can we use to make it more efficient. Digital can help a lot, and also it's about providing the right services for the today's world.
Yeah.
When you interact with brands, when you interact even like with your bank, you will be able to do a lot of those things online. So now the public has those expectations even for public services. So if you're able to, live chat your bank, you should be able to do the same with the police. And it's actually sometimes, from a security point of view, it's trickier with banks because you're talking about money and all of that. So why can't we do that with the police?
Yes.
So the public has those expectations, and they're not willing to call. And what happens now is it creates a kind of a parent-child relationship between the police and the public. So the public expects the police to do everything for them. So there's a lot of hand-holding, and I think that because back then those numbers, so 999 and 101 here in the UK, have been advertised so much as being the channel, the preferred channel. Now people don't even look at what they should do. They just pick their phone and like, I'm going to ask. That's why I'm going to ask. And we know that more than 60% of the calls are not crime-related or incident-related. It's someone asking a question. And when you start analysing all those topics, you can see that most of the time it's not a police matter. It's something that could be a TfL matter, or so TfL is the transport here. It could be something for, something that the police doesn't do at all. For example, here in London, the police doesn't deal with lost and found. But you've lost your wallet, what you do, you call the police. And that just takes time on the phone, even to say, hello, what is your problem? And then it takes 2 minutes to just have this discussion. So there's a lot of things around educating the public. What is a police matter? What is not a police matter? What can you do on your own? things like, I don't know, retrace your steps and try to find your wallet yourself.
Yeah,
But people will call first. Has anyone found my wallet? In a city of 8 million people.
Yeah, that's very crazy. And now I kind of identified one of the problems, like in terms of the process, and maybe I know that this might be really big, but like can go through maybe some of the how you approach the process to solve this problem.
Yes, sure. So we, in this big roadmap, we had several projects to solve this. So one of them, which is the big one, and it's probably the one we're going to talk more about, is to launch a new website. But that website would be nothing like the website they had. That would be a platform and a hub for new digital services. So really following along the lines of GDS here, so government services. You can do most of your most of those processes and applications and all of that online, using the same principles with what you want to do with the police.
Right.
So building this platform to be able to host those new services that are going to come in the future. Right. Then start digitizing those services. And then in parallel, we were looking at other transformation in the organization, opening new channels, so live chat. And also we had things around social media. So two things around social media, one being how can you use social media for exactly the same thing, so reporting a crime on social media, tracking what's happening with your case and all of that, but also how can you engage with communities. So in improving this relationship with the police, there is this kind of transactional aspect, so things you have to do with the police, but there's also how can you start being part of the same community? How do you start educating yourself before something happens to you?
Right,
before you have to do something with the police. And how can you use today's tools? So today we're talking about social media, but how can we be ready for whatever's going to come next in the future?
Yeah, that's right.
And the one we started with, so we started with two things. One I've been a bit less involved with is around doing a trial on Twitter, where people could report a crime online.
Okay.
And the reason why we started with this is because we identified that people were already reporting crime online.
Okay.
Well, already reporting crime on Twitter, but because the police was not equipped with this, they didn't know how to deal with this. And it's most of the time, there's a lot of people kind of witnessing something. So it's really weird. I've seen this person being mugged and I have a picture, what do I do? And they think that because that they are dropping in on Twitter, they've done their job as a citizen. But then the police has to be to ask more questions, capture things, capture information. So how can you create this dialogue from this initial kind of report? And the second really big project is to start this platform. So the way we approach this is to, after the discovery phase, we did another kind of mini discovery specifically on the website to really understand what would be the first version of the website. So calling it an MVP or whatever you want to call it is what is the first version that will deliver value to the public and to the organization. And we approached it in kind of two steps. One was to really define what would be that V1, like the full launch, but how can we test this and how can we avoid having a big bang and how can we deliver this progressively? So we launched a beta.
Right.
And because we're talking about the police, we're talking about government and public services, how can you have a kind of trial and error in the context of very kind of sensitive processes? So we launched a beta and it was really an opt-in beta. So they were still running the old website in parallel. And then we were informing people about new services, and if they wanted to try it, they could. And then we were launching one service at a time. So then we could focus and really make sure that that service was not broken, and really manually kind of control everything that was happening there. Okay. And as soon as we were like, okay, this is fine, there's no issue with this, kind of bring a bit more automation there.
Okay, so you probably, I imagine you picked a less sensitive service to work with instead of, like, for example, I don't know the names of the services here, the police, but not the one dealing with like murders or something like that, right? You probably picked something less sensitive, or not.
So what we did is we first of all listed all the services, and that was actually quite interesting because they didn't have a list of services, so we had to investigate, like, interesting choice of word. Yeah, so we had to investigate their services to really list everything and to really understand what do you need in this service. So I really started breaking it down into almost technical modules, because some services require to prove your identity. Some services require payment. Some services require to have to attach a file or something like this. So we're listing this, and some services just require a form. So we listed it from a kind of technical point of view, but then we also listed it from the value it would provide. So how much value would it provide to the Met? So looking at volumes, but also looking at how much resources this specific service take today.
Right.
And then we looked at how much value it would provide for the public.
Okay.
And we had this big matrix of efforts versus value, very kind of normal standard thing. We had nothing in the low effort, high value, unfortunately. But we started picking the two others quadrants around kind of low value, medium value, low efforts, and then slightly more efforts but high value. So kind of the two we start with, and we decided to start with the one that was the less critical from an incident point of view.
Right.
Meaning that is this something where you need to deploy people straight away?
Okay.
That's critical, because if you mess things up, you might put someone in danger. So that's not the one we picked first, and that's the one that had the highest volume. And by doing this, that was also a way to prove to internal stakeholders the value of doing this. So we kind of had we've been authorized to kind of start with this, but that was also a way to build a business case internally to get more funding, to kind of carry on building new services. So the one we started with was road traffic incidents.
Right.
So I don't know how that works again in Brazil, but if you have an accident here, if no one is injured and if you exchange details, you don't have to do anything with the police. You can carry on with your life, and most of the time you just have to deal with your insurance company.
Right.
But sometimes your insurance company asks you for a reference number from the police. But the police doesn't do anything with it. So it generates a lot of demand, like a lot of volume of requests, where actually the police doesn't need to do anything at all about it. So there's a lot of room for improvement there.
Exactly.
But then if someone did a hit and run, so someone smashed your car and then left, and you don't have their details, or maybe you just have like the license plates, but you don't have the contact details of the person, that's actually an offense. You're not supposed to hit someone and run. If someone has been injured, that's the same, you have to report it to the police. So there are several cases where you have to report it to the police. And one of the first principles we applied is what we call triage. So what needs to be reported, what doesn't need to be reported, and then directing them to the right form or the right service depending on your situation. Because at the moment when you go to a police station, you're going to have the same 20-page form to fill out for something that you were probably not supposed to fill out, to the big case where something really bad happened and you had to fill it out.
Yeah, okay. So
really building this kind of intelligence in the system to redirect you to where you need to go to, and just have the set of questions you really need to answer. So we started with this. That was very challenging because it's not just about designing the service, the front end of the service, it's also looking at what are they going to do with the form when it comes in, and really rethinking about the full back-end process, what type of skill sets those operators in the background will need to have to now deal with this new kind of digital demand coming in, and all of that was done at once, because you can't just do the front end and let them okay, you will have this, you will figure it out. No, it's really helping them to do everything at once, because when you launch the service, you need to have all the team in the back office ready.
Yeah, it makes sense. I imagine the project, this particular process itself should involve several departments as well. So how was it before, particularly this one which we're discussing now, how was it before? Like how, if someone filled a form, and what happened beforehand?
Yeah, it's actually really funny. It's funny to realize that this is how it works nowadays. So let's start from, you have an accident, and then you realize that you have to report it to the police. So you have to find a police station, And unfortunately, a few police stations been closed recently, so you have to find one open, and it might not be just next to your house. So you go there, and you most of the time have to queue. And there's no trash system when you come in the police station, so it's first person served.
Yeah.
So you will probably have to queue, then you explain your situation, you're going to be given a form, because it's 20 pages, you can't fill it out right now, and it's asking you information you might not have with you. So then you go back home, you fill out the form. Some of the questions are a bit confusing, and because it's on paper, you're also allowed to skip questions, because if you can't be bothered, you'd be like, I don't care. And then you go back to the police station, and the law says you have to hand it to a police officer. So you can't put it in a box. You have to queue again to give it to a police officer. Then that paper form goes in a box, and then it goes to the mail, and then is sent physically to another building in London. Where you have all the road traffic incidents, and the team dealing with this is specialised in road traffic incident. Then there's a manager taking the forms, reviewing the form, adding annotation on some sort of post-it note, and then dispatching it to the right person. They kind of organise per borough, so it's like smaller parts of London. Then that person takes it and key it in the system manually. And then, because they have to also do some stats with accidents and all of that, and they have to pass it on the transport company to TfL, but the systems don't talk to each other, because the system they were using has been designed in the 90s. Wow. Obviously it's not connected. Also considering that a lot of people have digital evidences, so they have a picture of their car or a video of what happened or something like that, but their systems and the machines are standalone systems, so they don't have access to the internet. So they have either another computer on the side, or sometimes just an iPad to be able to view whatever link someone has sent. Sometimes people kind of mail USB stick, but they're like, I can't do anything with this because I'm not allowed to plug it into my laptop. So all of that is a bit broken. And then so they have to give the stats to TfL. So because the system don't talk to each other, they give that paper form to another team that's going to key in again into another system. So that's what happens. If you had an accident, everyone is fine. It's just very long, and it's a bit sad that it's long, but that's it. But it takes a lot of time, and if you didn't even have to fill out the form, that will take still all those resources from the Met to come to the conclusion that they're not going to do anything with this. Thank you, bye.
It's such a waste, isn't it?
But there's another case with a road traffic incident, which is making an allegation on someone. So you've noticed someone driving crazy in the street, you're allowed to report them. Or, I don't know, you're a cyclist and someone kind of drove very dangerously next to you, or you've seen someone passing a red light or something like that, you're allowed to report them if you have an evidence. But the law says you have 15 days to report them. But if you think about this entire process, by the time someone is ready to prosecute someone, those 15 days were gone.
Absolutely.
Because you're allowed, you have 15 days between the moment of the incident and the moment of the person is prosecuted. But as a member of the public, you can report it on day 13. But then that leaves just one day for the police to do something about it.
Yeah, that's
so with all that process, only 5% of the people were able to be prosecuted.
Wow, that's horrible.
Yeah.
And then you went through the implementation, I bet, when you're talking about public services, and we're talking about people that it's not part of their job using the digital tools. So I imagine there were big challenges around educating them, around telling them the value of changing their own process, which they are probably doing for years.
Yes.
So how is it? How did you guys tackle this?
The other challenge we had is that happened at the same time that a big budget cut.
Oh.
So people saw this as a threat to their job.
Oh, yes.
So that was really hard. But we had to rely on them to understand the process and how to improve it. So that was a bit challenging, and we had to request a lot of help from the management team to just reassure them that we're not here to design something that's going to replace you. just to make your life easier, so you can actually deal with more demand faster. We took them on that journey, and we actually designed the solution together. And that's very key when you're doing a big digital transformation project, because people are scared of change. But if they're part of the solution, actually the change is much easier. So that came with a lot of prototyping, like a lot of prototyping, a lot of co-creation sessions where they're part of the session, and you're helping. You kind of know as a designer what you want out of the session, but you're not doing the session to get new ideas. You're doing the session to help them going through this process to understand what we're trying to achieve,
right,
and then to feel that they've been part of the solution. And it's almost like a research session, except that you're doing exercises and you're sketching things. But because they think they're part of the solution, it's much easier for them. And then you are prototyping that solution. You're actually testing the solution you've designed together. You invite them to the testing sessions. They hear first thing from a member of the public what is good or bad.
Right.
So then they can't say no, that it's the wrong idea. It's like, well, that was yours, and we tested it, and you heard the public saying it. So now, and you're, as a designer, you almost become just a facilitator and a moderator in this process.
And I also think it's their accomplishment as well.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. And I just, my favorite moment in this entire process was that, so on the road traffic incident, we had that person in the team, just quite senior. She was very pushback, like so much pushback, really hard. During the workshop, she was like, this will never work, this is bad, that can't work because of this and this and this. We prototyped the solution that came out from her team, and the people invited at the session came to the testing sessions. And then this moment at the end of the day where we were just going through all the learnings during the sessions, where she was the one standing and writing on the board, and we like writing post-it being like, but that person said this, so we can't do that, so why should we not like do it this way, and magic, like
that's so
the
nice.
fact that she heard it from the member of the public changed everything.
Really cool.
Yeah.
And in like actual facts, what did change? What changed after we implemented services? And
So let's talk about this specific example of road traffic incident. Because it's a really big volume, and when you have that volume, it's actually really easy to see the change.
and you mentioned like 5% resolution in some of the cases. Right?
So now 70% of the road traffic incidents are done online.
Right.
From zero, because that service didn't exist.
Yeah.
It's been done online. I don't have all the numbers around that triage, but I know that now everyone is just filling out the right form, basically.
Nice.
So if you didn't have to fill out the form, then you don't fill out the form. And there's also, what we've done like a simplified form that gives you that reference number for your insurance company, but that doesn't require any investigation from the police. So it reduces that demand on the police a lot.
Yeah.
The example I was telling you about allegations, we moved from only 5% before to 65% of prosecution. And the 65% is not because the rest, the 35 rest of the percent are not arriving on time. Is because it's actually not something that can be prosecuted. But at least time is not an issue anymore, and they get the demand, and it's also way more qualitative. So we've done a lot of work around making sure we're asking the right questions.
Yeah.
So then the information the police is going to get is something they can start with to do the investigation straight away without having to call back. So other few numbers on, so the next big thing we did is online crime reporting.
Okay.
We've not touched on yet, but originally the Met only wanted us to open it to few type of crimes, but we explained to them that if you have the right process in place, it doesn't change anything to spend 10 minutes on the phone with someone or to allow the public to report it with the channel of their choice.
Right, yeah.
If they feel they need the support of a human being, let them pick up the phone. But if they feel they don't need it and it's easier for them to report online, let them do it. It's all about channel choice. Yeah. So we trialed during the beta phase online crime reporting on any crime type. And we proved that it's actually possible, and the quality of the data they get is actually much higher than any phone conversation.
Wow.
Because people can spend the time to write the information and think about how they're going to explain it. where on the phone you're a bit like pressured to deliver information, and then sometimes the conversation can't drag forever, so operators kind of are trying to deal with the demand on the phone as well, so sometimes they might not be able to ask all the questions they should ask. So they get more qualitative data, and then on what they receive, there's 88% I think of what they receive that doesn't require to call them back to start doing something about that report.
Wow.
They can investigate straight away.
So
or close the case straight away, because sometimes, if you, I don't know, someone steals your phone in the street, the police will probably not do anything about it. But it's important to report it, because if you don't report it, then the police doesn't have any visibility on what's happening. And we've heard a lot from the public that people are now reporting things they will not report before, because it's easy to do and they can do it on their own time. If they have to phone and spend 10 minutes on the phone with someone, they will not report it. And we've heard a lot from the public on kind of minor crime that they're like, I can't be bothered, so I'm not going to report it. So you have a very biased view of what's happening in the city.
Yeah, so I bet what you're saying is around the perception that people have from the police. So I was like, it's not worth reporting something because it takes a lot of work, it doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
But as long as it's easy, you just do it, and it might change something because they have information, they have more trends around what's going on in the particular area, this kind of thing. So I bet like the perception thing is really big as well, right?
Yeah.
I bet it changes as well. So yeah, really good.
So I don't have those numbers around satisfaction and perception, because that's something that takes a bit more time.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we've heard during the research that people are saying that they will definitely use this way more.
Very nice. And how long did it take from, for example, this one, the traffic allegations one, from the time you started the beta until you got actual numbers? How long does this take? Months, years?
To get numbers?
Yeah, just start getting like proper reporting and that being useful to the
3
police. Days?
Yeah, like getting numbers. I always say like a first week to get numbers.
That's really far. It's crazy.
So what we did is that because it's interesting on this one, because there was nothing before. So what we were doing is using the traffic of people trying to report it online and realizing, oh, that doesn't exist, so I'm going to call. So grabbing this traffic that was already existing to get them to opt in the beta and try to report online. Because the volume per year, only on road traffic incidents, so not the allegation or the other one, just volume per year, something like 38,000.
Wow.
So in 1 week you already have like hundreds of reports. So we launched it in the beta, and we really wanted to have a low beta, just really to make sure that we've not, messed up something.
Yeah.
Actually, it took like few days for this to take on, and then take-up rate was really, really good.
Nice.
So we had data really quickly. We could improve it really quickly, and when you have your service that's live, you can use like a lot of different tools to analyze everything. But we did a mix of having Google Analytics to really understand where people are dropping in the process. On something like this, we can really use like conversion rates, like from someone that's searching information to someone that fill out the form properly until the end,
right.
And where are people dropping in your form and all of that. We did qualitative research as well. So on the live version, we did a lot of accessibility research, because as soon as you have a live version, you can test it with any type of disability. And then we also looked at the number of forms and what was the ratio between what's happening on the phone or a police station and paper form with the take-up rates with the digital form. And then we also did like a lot of deep sample, so grabbing forms that people have reported to look at the answers and see, did they answer that question properly? Do we need to change something in the form, change the order of the question, all of that to improve the service?
We've been discussing for a couple of minutes now, so how can you say the project is today? Is it still ongoing? What's the stage it is? When actually did you leave? And who did you leave it to? Like how was this handover?
Sure. So maybe kind of a couple of things around the process. We started the delivery in April 2016. So we had an idea of what the scope was of the project. So we started really bang on design sprints and delivery, like dev sprints and all of that, April 2016. We launched the beta in October 2016, so 6 months later. all those new services and all of that.
Oh, wow, that's nice.
And we launched the website in March 2017, so 6 months after the visa.
Right.
During this process, we were working with kind of two teams internally. We were working with DMC, which is the Directorate of Media and Communication, so it's like the marketing team. But the marketing team is in charge of like pure marketing and also all the press. And so that was one team, and the other team we were working with was a team of police officers. So working really closely with the chief inspector. That was really kind of the police brain behind it,
right.
And working with a team of other police officers to really get all those subject matter experts. And then we were working with all the subject matter experts within the organization. We probably engaged with 200 stakeholders in a year.
My
That
God.
was quite crazy. So because we brought them on this journey, they understood our process, they understood how we were working. We were never like working in the office and then bringing them and letting them deal with it. So we're really doing this together all the way through.
Nice.
And toward the end, the last month was the pure handover month. So we produce some handover documents, but also making sure they were trained. And then we left them with the tools to do it themselves and a big roadmap.
Nice.
So setting the priorities and helping them to know what the next steps would be. And the purpose of this platform was really to be a platform they could scale and build on. So we delivered a set of services, but then it's now their role to build the new services onto the platform. But technically everything is ready. And the next step, actually, I think is what's mentioning, is that we started with the Met, but now it's going to become the national platform. So they're going to take it and deploy it onto other police forces in the UK. And the idea, I mean, they're still working on it, but ideally, a lot of police forces in the UK will use the same system and the same platform, so you can also have more national services, even if it's managed at the local level and with a local feel and flavour. There's not millions ways to report a crime, at least in the UK. So how can you help all the police forces to be a bit more consistent and use best practices from one police force to another?
Very interesting, very nice. So I guess I have just two more questions for you. One is, people usually coming from visual, graphic, etc.
Yeah.
How, if you were the person now, what would you say to yourself in terms of what you need to learn to tackle those UX challenges, or to become a proper UX designer in the real sense of the word? You know, so what would you say to yourself in this point?
I would say the most important thing on any project is to understand the problem you're trying to solve. And that applies to graphic design as well. Like, what are you trying to do with that visual element you're trying to produce? So really always go back to what is the problem we're trying to solve. And understand the big picture. Even if you're a small part of the process, understand the big picture, because if you're able to be on point on your part and understand how that fits with the big picture, you're going to be more relevant. And also, I think it's important as a designer to get the credibility from the rest of the team. And when you understand what you're trying to achieve, that's the best way to get that credibility. And I would also say that I'm a bit advocate of research. So even if you come from a visual design background, it's really important to be close to your end user. And to always have an intuitive approach. Test it, do different stuff, test it, like testing session. You don't need to have a PhD in user research to do that. And I can talk forever about how easy it is to do user research. You will probably mess up the first time, so you will probably be very leading as a moderator, but that's fine, try it and then you will learn. But at least you will get feedback from real users, and then don't ever listen to any opinions. If we're not sure, let's do it, let's prototype it, let's test it.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's really interesting. You say like you don't need much to do that. Like sometimes even we have to do sometimes like pen and paper, that's it, and you test it. That's
fine.
Really cool.
The other day we just to maybe give them an example, we had like on Friday we're like going around again around tiny functionality, And then what we did is I would just sketch it on a post-it, took a picture. It was a remote phone call, so we sketched it on a post-it, took a picture, sent it to everyone's like, is this what you mean? Oh yes. And then boom, discussion's gone.
Very high tech.
And actually, as a designer, I think that our role is sometimes just to help make people to make decisions. And by being able to sketch something or visualize something really quickly, that's what actually helps the entire project.
Yes, absolutely. I guess my last question for you is like, what tip in terms of studying would you give someone? Like, study this, study that, read this book, whatever.
Yeah. That's interesting because my background is, I've not said that actually, but I have a master's degree in mechanical engineering and industrial design, so I don't come from a visual design background, I come from the industrial design background, which I think helped me to think in systems instead of thinking in visuals, but I've been trying as a designer, so I like the aesthetic part of it, it's still super important. In terms of training, I would say, I think do projects. And when you start, it's hard because you might not be paid to do it at the beginning because you need to build your portfolio. But I think the best school is actually do something and try to do it. Pick a personal project, help a friend, or pick a fake project. I was like, oh, I don't know, I'm going to the gym and their website is shit or whatever. Sorry. Part of my French, but I'm French. So do something, even start small, try to do it, and then this is how you're going to start learning how you work and how you should work. In terms of books, there are plenty, I can send a list maybe.
No pressure.
There's one I really like is UX Undercover. It's a super small book, but it's a very practical book because sometimes, I mean, again, I don't know exactly how it works at the moment in Brazil, but when I started working in UX was not a thing. So people didn't know anything about processes, and when you were a UX designer in the organization, you're alone. And most of the time you're doing your own UX transformation inside the organization because people are not used to work with UX designers. And that book, UX Undercover, is a lot of small tips and tools to actually do it when you have no budget, no resources and all of that, and how you can start putting things in place. Because it's super easy to like watch talks from people in the Silicon Valley and they have a team of 15 designers and all the processes are in place, and you're like, I'm alone in a team where no one knows what I'm doing and how do I do this? So
they think design is about doing business cards and
and I think anything that makes you business savvy is a good reading. So thinking about more business models and how startups are built, because I think our role as designers sometimes is to be a bit more strategic and help the business to be more customer centric, and by designing that product actually we are influencing a lot the way the business is going to be run. So
that's awesome. Thank you very much. It was amazing.
Pleasure.
Hope you guys enjoyed. See you next time.
Bye.